abs. I'm a man of flesh and bone. I do have buns of steel, but my abs are just washboard.
Friends, it's me, Meerab, welcoming you once again to Starspill USA. And today, I do not simply bring you an update. I do not merely carry forward another chapter of Sister Wives, but I unfold before you a tale so vast, so drenched in irony, humiliation, and poetic collapse that it stretches like a tragic epic across every corner of the Brown family legacy. For what has happened to Kody Brown and his beloved fourth wife Robyn is not a mere stumble, not a little household inconvenience, but the kind of fall that resounds like thunder through reality television history. Because the eviction that tore them from their so-called sanctuary is not just about losing a house, it is about losing an identity, a throne, a narrative they had stitched together so carefully and so arrogantly. And when that throne was dragged out from under them, the crash was deafening. And oh my friends, imagine the mansion, once paraded before the cameras, with sweeping drone shots of its sprawling lawn, its elegant archways, its wide staircase where Kody once boasted of family gatherings. Now standing cold, echoing, stripped of laughter and stripped of pride. Its doors marked not by celebration, but by the stern finality of an eviction notice. That word alone, eviction, carrying the kind of weight no amount of family scripture or romantic speeches can soften, because it is legal, it is public, it is humiliating. And in that humiliation lies the poetic justice that fans across the world cannot stop talking about. Because this house was not just any house. It was the fortress that Kody and Robyn built as a monument to their bond, their so-called victory. While Christine grew restless, while Janelle quietly fought for respect, while Meri endured years of neglect, and yet all of them, all of their sacrifices, were eclipsed by the glowing image of Robyn's palace. The dream home where Kody spent holidays, where he locked himself away from the storm of his other marriages. But now that dream has curdled into nightmare. The very walls turning into monuments of debt and overreach. 'Cause what good is a chandelier when the bills are unpaid? What glory lies in polished wood when the taxes pile up? And so in the cold fluorescent lit courtroom, where no camera angles could soften the reality, Kody sat rigid, jaw clenched, its golden curls falling across a face burning with silent rage, while Robyn's carefully composed mask shattered. Her eyes glistening with panic, her voice cracking, as the truth finally demanded its pound of flesh. And oh, the silence that fell when the judge read the ruling, that silence heavier than any scream. For in that silence was the echo of every fan who had ever whispered karma. Every wife who had once felt ignored. Every child who had sensed the imbalance. Because this was not just a gavel striking wood, it was justice striking pride. And when the word evicted rang out, it was as though the mansion itself groaned, knowing its time as a stage of privilege was over. And outside that courthouse, cameras flashed, microphones stretched forward. Headlines already prepared. Kody and Robyn Brown evicted from Flagstaff Mansion. And the neighbors whispered, their voices laced with a mixture of pity and schadenfreude, watching as moving vans rumbled down the drive, men in uniforms carrying out boxes marked family photos, toys, Robyn's jewelry, business stock. Each cardboard container a reminder that the fortress had fallen, that the pedestal had cracked. And as reporters narrated every step, fans flooded social media, hashtags trending like wildfire, hashtag karma, 4KODY, hashtag ROBYNS, Palace Falls, hashtag evicted Brown drama memes, spreading faster than tears. Side-by-side pictures of Robyn weeping on the show next to the cold words of the court ruling, and some fans laughed, some wept, but all agreed on one thing. This was the moment when the empire of favoritism finally collapsed in full public view. Because for years, Christine had been mocked when she said she was leaving for her dignity. Janelle was pitied for trying to fight for fairness. Meri was dismissed as bitter for standing on the sidelines. But in the end, it was Kody and Robyn, the supposed victors, the last couple standing, who were left holding nothing but debts, empty rooms, and the bitter taste of humiliation. And friends, can you not see the poetic threads? Woven so tightly it feels scripted by Shakespeare himself, the hubris of a man who crowned himself king, pouring his love and wealth into one queen while starving the rest of affection, only to watch that crown tumble into the dust. The queen left clutching her children as the throne itself turned to ash. And the palace became a tomb of pride. For pride it was. Pride that drove them to that mansion they could not afford. Pride that made Kody boast about stability while Christine was packing her bags. Pride that made Robyn cry for sympathy while living in grandeur. And pride, my friends, always meets its fall. And what a fall this has been. Because the contrast is almost too sharp to believe. Christine thriving in independence. Janelle glowing with strength. Even Meri carving a path of quiet. Dignity. While Kody and Robyn, who once looked down from their high windows with smug smiles, now look out of car windows fogged with tears. Wondering where they will go next. Wondering how to explain to their children that the forever home is no more. Wondering if the cameras will ever again capture them as anything but a cautionary tale. And the fans, oh the fans. They will not let this moment slip into silence. They will immortalize it in tweets, in discussions, in watch parties, in endless YouTube recaps. Because this is not just Sister Wives news, this is Sister Wives history. The kind of scandal that rewrites the entire narrative. And future seasons, if they dare to continue, will never escape this shadow. Because no matter what story they try to tell, no matter how much Robyn pleads for sympathy or Kody blusters with excuses, the world has already seen the truth in black and white. In court documents stamped with finality, in eviction orders pinned like scars to their names, and the symbolism is too sharp to ignore because Coyote passed that great dream of Kody's. Lies barren, still unbuilt, his promises scattered like ashes. His wives gone, his family divided, and now his mansion gone too. And so the patriarch who once spread his arms to the camera, declaring unity and vision, now stands with empty hands, a broken crown. A legacy built not on triumph, but on collapse. And Robyn, the wife who was once the favorite, the queen of his heart, now left to explain to her children why the dream has ended, why the sanctuary has vanished, why the fairy tale ended not with happily ever after, but with a moving van. And perhaps that is the cruelest truth of all, that the downfall of Kody and Robyn is not hidden in whispers. Not cushioned by privacy, but broadcast, dissected, immortalized so that long after the dust has settled on Flagstaff's empty mansion, fans will remember not the glitter of its chandeliers, but the echo of its emptiness. Not the pride of its staircase, but the weight of its silence. And in that memory, in that haunting, lies the true downfall. The eternal reminder that pride built on unfairness cannot endure. That favoritism dressed up as love will always collapse. And that in the saga of Sister Wives, the greatest humiliation did not belong to the women who walked away, but to the couple who thought they had won, only to find themselves evicted, shamed, dethroned, remembered forever, not for their triumph, but for the devastating spectacle of their fall.
Here in Sedona, Arizona, I'm sitting down with Kody, Meri, Robyn, Christine and David, and Janelle.
Every word spoken aloud in that charged courtroom cut deeper than a knife into the carefully woven fabric of Kody Brown's reality. Undoing stitch by stitch the grand tale he had fought so hard to control, for this was not merely the collapse of a financial claim or the loss of a property, it was the slow, surgical dismantling of an identity he had paraded for decades on screens across the world. The mask of patriarchal invincibility he had worn with such pride now slipping away in front of strangers, family, and foes alike. Each boast of authority he had once declared with thunder now fell flat under the merciless weight of undeniable documents, gold records stamped with signatures. Numbers and transactions that bore no sympathy for charm, ego, or bluster. And when Kody finally tried to speak, when he attempted to defend himself with that same booming voice he had wielded for years to silence dissent within his fractured family, the sound that emerged was not the commanding tone of a leader, but the brittle, desperate rambling of a man cornered, a man insisting that no one understood him, that the system was against him, that his family was unlike others and deserved exemption. Yet the courtroom was no stage. No TLC edit could slice away his stammer. No sympathetic soundtrack could soften his outburst. For here, reality was unfiltered, unkind, and stripped of flattering narrative. The judge sat unmoved, his expression carved in stone, indifferent to sentiment, immune to excuses. For in this chamber only facts ruled, and facts are merciless when Robyn's turn came. Her voice shook with fragility as she begged the court for compassion, for time, for mercy, speaking of her children. Of the roof that had finally felt permanent after so many years of uncertainty. Her words cracked beneath the sheer weight of her fear, her tears spilling freely as she clutched at the last shreds of stability. For to her, those walls were not simply plaster and paint. They were sanctuary, belonging, her fragile claim to safety. Yet law does not bend for tears, however raw, however genuine. And the documents remained final, the verdict inevitable. And when the gavel came down, it echoed like thunder through the chamber. The decision abrupt, unyielding, merciless, eviction. And in that single word, the fortress that Kody and Robyn had built as a monument to privilege and power crumbled. Their carefully guarded sanctuary reduced to a house with an expiration date. Their humiliation profound, public, and absolute. Kody sat rigid, jaw clenched, his eyes burning with rage. Odd. But the slump of his shoulders betrayed the collapse within, while Robyn broke openly. Her sobs filling the chamber, mascara streaking down her cheeks as she crumbled before the world. The once protected favorite now exposed in raw fragility. A sight burned into memory as a living metaphor of reversal. For the woman accused for years of enjoying luxury while the other wives scraped by was now the most broken figure in the room. Her grief a public spectacle, her fall a narrative that no viewer could ignore. And yet the blow did not end within the courtroom walls, for it reverberated outward across the fractured Brown family, across fans worldwide who flooded social media, with outrage, with pity, with schadenfreude, with sorrow for the innocent children and mockery for the parents who had ignored every warning. Hashtags trended, memes spread like wildfire. Commentators recorded endless videos. Voices rose in unison, declaring that karma had at last arrived. That the throne Kody had built on arrogance had turned to ash, and inside the family itself, the reactions were no less brutal. For Christine, long free of Kody's grip, felt vindicated. Her years of warnings validated with ruthless clarity, while Janelle, who had once fought bitterly for financial independence, saw the verdict as the ultimate confirmation of her deepest fears about his reckless handling of money. And even Meri, long discarded in favor of Robyn, recognized the bitter irony that the man who had flaunted his preference now faced ruin at the side of that very woman. And yet beyond vindication, the ruling did more than expose debts and property lines. It stripped Kody bare, unraveled the last pretense of patriarchal authority, dissolved the title he had clung to, and when he and Robyn walked out of that courthouse, the cameras may not have been TLCs, but the picture captured was unforgettable. Robyn with tissue in hand, cheeks streaked with black tears of sorrow, Kody storming ahead, jaw tight. Humiliation etched across his face, his silence screaming louder than any statement. The illusion shattered. Replaced with a humiliation so complete that no spin, no denial, no staged confessional could conceal it. Yet eviction is not a moment. It is a process. Long, grinding, cruel. And at first denial took hold, Kody roaring of injustice, promising appeals. Dreaming of loopholes, yet courts do not bow to tantrums, and soon the deadlines came. Cold papers. with final dates, demands to vacate, signatures that could not be erased. For Robyn, the packing was agony. Each photograph she wrapped, each frame lifted from the wall a wound, every possession stripped from its place, a fragment of her soul torn away. Her trembling hands betraying the sorrow she tried desperately to hide from her children while Kody's fury boiled unchecked. For to him, it was never about wood or plaster. It was about dominance, control, pride ripped apart. And neighbors whispered of the anger echoing through their walls of slammed doors. And shouted curses, the tantrums of a man unraveled, his facade cracking like glass beneath relentless pressure. But the truest humiliation came on moving day, when the fortress of status was reduced to cardboard boxes stacked upon a driveway. Their belongings labeled like relics, their furniture hauled away in trucks, not of prestige but of necessity. The house that had been their throne no more than an empty shell, a grave of ambition, and the sight was merciless. Neighbors watching through curtains, cameras clicking from the street, children's toys carried out in plain view. The favorite wife and her patriarch, once untouchable, now exposed as evictees, their downfall, laid bare in the most ordinary, pitiless way. And as each box was loaded, as each room echoed emptier, the story was sealed not merely the end of a home, but the collapse of an empire. The death of an illusion, the unraveling of a man who had believed himself untouchable. Now reduced to a cautionary tale whispered across living rooms, replayed on screens, dissected by commentators, shared in mocking memes and bitter posts. As fans declared with equal parts triumph and pity that the king had fallen, and he had dragged his queen with him. Yet beyond the gossip and the hashtags, the tragedy deepened. For the children carried scars invisible to the public eye. Their whispered questions in the night, their confusion at why the home they thought permanent now echoed with emptiness. Their shame at school as peers repeated headlines their parents had read aloud. Their loss greater than any adult collapse. And Robyn, torn between shielding them and facing her own despair, found herself drowning in guilt while Kody retreated. Into rage, his voice carrying down empty hallways like a ghost of the man he once pretended to be. And so the empire ended not with applause, but with the scraping of furniture against tile, the thud of boxes dropped on pavements, the hollow slam of a final door, and the silence that followed was louder than any gavel.
It's just the pressure of the faith. Maybe it's the idea that I don't want to have another failure. I don't know, but I keep thinking that you and I could make this work.
The same staircase upon which Kody had once stood so confidently to deliver interviews, where his words had been rehearsed and recorded beneath the flattering glare of production lights, now stood stripped and skeletal, bereft of its former significance. The very banister that had framed his self-importance reduced to little more than cold timber and shadow. A reminder of just how swiftly glory can collapse into emptiness. And the silence that clung to it was not a gentle one, but the kind that thrums with accusation, as if the house itself bore witness to every arrogance, every dismissal, every whispered slight against the wives he had left behind. The living room beyond that staircase echoing with a coldness it had never known. Emptied of couches and rugs and cheerful stage-managed decor, its emptiness almost theatrical in the way it exposed the lie. The illusion of family cohesion. The careful positioning of furniture that had once suggested togetherness, now gone. Leaving only barren walls and the sharp sting of footsteps, every sound bouncing back like ridicule as though mocking the very pretense that this had ever been a sanctuary of love and unity. And in that space, Robyn's composure crumbled utterly. The mask she had clung to for years dissolving in a torrent of tears. Not the graceful weeping of a matriarch wronged, but the broken sobbing of a woman. Watching her carefully curated identity being prized away from her fingers. For as the movers bent their backs to lift the heavy dining table that had once been her crown jewel, the table she had set and polished and decorated for holiday meals filmed with an air of superiority, the one she had believed anchored her. As the chosen wife, she lunged forward, her hands outstretched in frantic protest, her voice cracking as she insisted through heaving breaths that some objects could not be boxed, that they were not possessions but fragments of her soul, anchors of her belonging in a family that had always doubted her, talismans against whispers that she had destroyed the sisterhood. And yet the men lifting the table did not pause, did not heed, did not see anything sacred in what they carried, for to them it was just another piece of furniture tagged and listed. For removal, just inventory to be hauled away into the cavernous belly of the truck outside. And that indifference crushed her. Each thud of furniture against the truck bed sounding like the pounding of a gavel against her spirit. Each taped box a reminder that she was not the victor of this saga, but another casualty. Her grief spiraling into hysteria so sharp that even the children, bewildered and frightened, began to cling tighter to her arms. Their sobs fusing with hers until the house vibrated with their combined anguish, a chorus of loss no comfort could soothe. Kody, meanwhile, stood apart, rigid, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. Not in protection, but in the brittle pose of a man fighting to maintain dignity while humiliation scorched through every pore. His face an ashen mask that could not conceal the way his jaw worked furiously, clenching and unclenching as he watched the dismantling of not merely his home, but of the persona he had built upon it. For this was not about couches and tables and boxes. This was about the evaporation of his myth, the unraveling of the patriarch he had once fancied himself to be, the commander of a vast plural family empire that TLC had broadcast to millions. And what made it unbearable was not just the movers or the officers verifying papers on clipboards, but the quiet gathering of neighbors beyond the driveway. Men and women who leaned against their fences with folded arms and shaking heads, their whispers cutting sharper than any blade. Their murmurs carrying the fatal words, fallen, failed, finished. For these were the same people who had once watched him strut proudly through their streets, his chest puffed, his hair tossed, basking in the odd celebrity of being a polygamous patriarch on television. And now they saw not a star, not a leader, but just another debtor, evicted like any common man. Stripped of special protection, reduced to humiliation, and the shame of their judgment pressed harder against him than the official order taped to his door. Elsewhere, the other wives absorbed the news with their own layered emotions. Christine, long liberated from his grip, felt her relief cresting into something like divine vindication. Whispering to trusted friends that she could almost hear the universe itself delivering justice. Janelle, who had warned and pleaded and endured endless frustration as Kody funneled resources into Robyn's comforts while neglecting debts, now found in the eviction a bitter validation of her fears. Truth she wished had not come at the cost of the children's tears. Meri, who had been discarded and belittled, rolled her eyes at the cruel irony that the wife he had exalted as his true partner now stood not beside him in triumph but in ruin. Okay, her privilege dissolving before the world's gaze. And even Christine's daughters watching online could not help but exchange glances of almost guilty satisfaction. Their pain long overshadowed by the favoritism that had defined their childhoods, while the wider internet erupted with a cacophony of commentary, forums gleefully sharing photographs of the emptied house with captions like karma, justice, and finally, memes multiplying with ruthless speed. Each one slicing away at Kody's pride until nothing remained but tatters of a once vaunted image, though within that cruelty lay threads of pity too. Pity for the children clutching at their mother, pity for the innocents crushed beneath the arrogance of adults. Yet even sympathy for Robyn fractured quickly, many seeing, in her sobbing not tragedy but irony, the collapse of privilege dressed as grief. The whispers spread beyond fans and neighbors into family networks, distant cousins, brothers, in-laws, all repeating the same refrain. If only Kody had been fair. If only he had not exalted one wife while discarding the others. if only pride had not consumed him, yet such reflections came too late. For the eviction itself had become more than a logistical act, more than the execution of a court writ. It was a symbol, an unmasking, a spectacle of arrogance brought to its knees, echoing, louder than the thud of any truck door. The children's room stood hollow, posters peeled from walls, beds unscrewed and carted off. Toys tossed unceremoniously into boxes, until the spaces that had been their only refuge in a life lived under scrutiny stood sterile and bare. And their weeping underscored the truth more piercingly than any headline. This was not just the loss of a house, but the implosion of a world. And when at last the final box was sealed, when the last piece of furniture scraped across the threshold, when the truck doors clanged shut with a sound like a tomb ceiling, Kody remained rooted in the empty driveway, the silence of the gutted, home behind him roaring louder than any confrontation he had staged. And he felt, truly felt, for perhaps the first time, the void of control slipping irretrievably from his grasp. His empire crumbled, his myth exposed, his name reduced from patriarch to punchline. And though he tried to hold his shoulders square, tried to bite back the sting, the truth bled through in the hollow set of his eyes. Kody Brown, once master of a sprawling plural family, was now